There are moments in royal history when silence breaks louder than a scream. On a bright morning at Buckingham Palace, 10-year-old Princess Charlotte stood still beside Queen Camilla, her smile practiced, her eyes trembling. And then, she whispered two words that stopped time. "Please help me." The man she spoke to was a royal guard, a soldier bound by centuries of rules so strict they'd never been broken in over 300 years. But what he did next shattered royal tradition and saved a child's heart. This isn't a fairy tale. It is what really happens when duty meets humanity, when a soldier decides that protecting a child is worth defying a crown. Before we uncover what really unfolded in that courtyard, take a second to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who believes in quiet acts of courage. Every click helps us bring more true, emotional stories to light. Stories that remind us that compassion still exists even in the most unexpected places. All right, let's step into the palace courtyard together. The morning light over Buckingham Palace was the kind that seemed painted rather than real. Soft, golden, and full of quiet promise. Tourists pressed against the black iron gates, cameras poised, murmuring in dozens of languages. Brass music drifted through the courtyard, slow and regal. To anyone watching, it looked like a perfect royal day, the kind of morning Britain loves to show the world. But behind that picture-perfect calm, something else was unfolding. A small figure stood beside Queen Camilla, her pale blue coat perfectly pressed, her hair tied back in a ribbon that gleamed in the sunlight. She looked every bit the young princess the cameras adored. Princess Charlotte of Wales, 10 years old, dignified, silent, and still. But for those who were close enough, and there were very few, there was something off about her stillness. It wasn't composure. It was tension. Charlotte's fingers twisted together in front of her. She wasn't fidgeting like a child bored with ceremony. She was bracing. Her little shoulders were too straight, her chin a little too high, as if she'd been told to hold it there no matter how much it hurt. From afar, the queen consort's hand rested on Charlotte's shoulder, a gesture that photographers would later call tender. Up close, though, it was something else. The hand wasn't comforting, it was guiding, even controlling. A grip just a shade too firm.
The brass section played a triumphant scale, echoing off the ancient stones. Flags fluttered. The crowd sighed in admiration. But 20 yards away, standing motionless at his post, one man wasn't admiring the view. His name was Lance Corporal Theo Rena, a soldier whose eyes had seen the deserts of Helmand, not just the polished stone of London. His red tunic gleamed like the others, but his eyes were trained to notice the things most people missed. And right now, those eyes were locked on the small princess. He'd been taught to observe crowds, to spot movement, behavior, threat. Today, his instinct whispered something else entirely. There was no danger coming toward the royal family. The danger seemed to be within it. Charlotte wasn't just nervous. She was scared. Not the kind of fear a child gets before a speech or a photo. A deeper kind. The kind that teaches silence. Rena shifted slightly, the weight of his rifle resting against his shoulder. He'd stood through riots, endured taunts, and faced gunfire without flinching. But this was different. His chest tightened, the same way it used when something unseen moved in the distance overseas. He watched Queen Camilla lean down, whisper something to Charlotte. The cameras caught a grandmotherly smile. But Rena saw the girl's jaw clench, her small body stiffen. Chin up, back straight, the queen murmured under her breath. Charlotte obeyed, but her eyes, her bright blue eyes, flickered with something desperate. Across the courtyard, Rena caught that glance. For a moment, their eyes met, soldier and child. He didn't know what she was trying to say, but he felt it. That look, it wasn't confusion. It wasn't curiosity. It was a silent cry for help. And yet, he stood still, because that's what a royal guard does. No movement, no emotion, no words. Even when every instinct inside you screams move. The ceremony continued as though nothing were wrong. The band struck up the opening march. Tourists lifted their phones. The crowd applauded as a queen and her granddaughter stepped into view. But Charlotte's smile, faint, practiced, unchildlike, faltered for a split second. Her lip trembled, and she looked again at the man in red standing 20 yards away. He wasn't supposed to move. She wasn't supposed to speak. But destiny has a strange way of rearranging rules when something real begins to break beneath them. And on that bright spring morning, between the sound of brass and applause, a single unseen thread of fate began to tighten, binding a frightened little girl and the soldier who would soon risk everything for her. Theo Rena had been trained to stand still, not to feel, not to question. But stillness doesn't mean blindness. And today, his soldier's eyes caught everything. He had seen it before, that quiet stiffness, the false smile, the way someone tries too hard to appear calm when they are not. In Hellman, he'd seen civilians hide their terror behind politeness. He'd seen children stand the same way Princess Charlotte was standing now, too still, too quiet, as if motion itself might bring punishment. Rena's fingers twitched slightly against his rifle, not enough for anyone to notice, but just enough to tell him that something inside was waking up, that part of a soldier that senses when something isn't right. He watched the queen consort lean toward the girl again, her lips moving under the mask of a smile. To the tourist, it looked like a whisper of affection, but Rena saw the small flinch in Charlotte's shoulder. The hand that was meant to guide was pressing too hard. His jaw tightened beneath the bearskin hat. For 12 years, Theo had lived by one rule: observe before you act. It had kept him alive through the dust and the danger of Afghanistan. But here, in the polished calm of Buckingham Palace, that same rule felt like a cage. The music swelled, the crowd cheered, and behind the ceremony, a 10-year-old girl tried not to cry. Rena's gaze shifted between Charlotte and the Queen. Her grip, her movements, they were subtle, perfectly rehearsed, the kind that left no marks or cameras to find. But to a man trained to see the invisible, it was all there: control, pressure, fear. He wanted to believe he was mistaken. Maybe it was tension, maybe nerves, maybe he was imagining it. But then Charlotte looked up again. That glance, small, trembling, reached him like a flare in the desert night. And suddenly, he was back there, in the dust, the smell of cordite in the air, a father holding his daughter's hand. He remembered the checkpoint, the orders, the little girl with eyes too much like Charlotte's. He remembered turning them away because command said no civilians that day. 2 days later, her village was gone. He hadn't saved her then, and he'd carried that weight ever since. Now, standing in this royal courtyard, another little girl looked at him the same way, silently asking for help. And once again, rules stood between them. He took a slow, deliberate breath. 8 seconds in, 8 seconds out, the same breathing pattern he'd used in firefights to keep himself from breaking apart. But inside, he was already breaking. His mind screamed the truth: this isn't your place. You'll lose everything. But his heart said something different: you've already lost enough. Then it happened, a tiny detail that shattered his hesitation. A single strand of Charlotte's hair slipped loose, falling across her cheek. Queen Camilla's smile froze. Her hand darted forward, not to fix it gently, but to grab. Her fingers wrapped around the girl's arm, sharp and commanding. Rena saw the child wince, so small, so hidden, that only someone truly watching could have seen it. And then, the whisper, 2 words that carried through the silence, even over the music: please don't. It wasn't loud, but Rena heard it as if she'd shouted it straight into his chest. The band kept playing. The tourists kept smiling. But for him, everything else fell away. He could hear his own heartbeat. He could feel the moment narrowing, like the instant before a trigger pull. And when Charlotte turned back, tears trembling in her eyes, she mouthed it again. This time, barely audible, yet more powerful than any command: please help me. Every oath, every order, every tradition drilled into him over 12 years of service, all of it collided with that one plea. The rifles gleamed, the drums rolled, and the guard line held steady, except for one man whose boots began to shift ever so slightly on the cobblestone. A single thought rose above the noise in his head: if I stay silent now, I'm no soldier at all. And so, as centuries of discipline anchored him in place, Theo Rena prepared to do the one thing a royal guard must never do. He was about to move. For over 3 centuries, no royal guard had ever moved without an order. Not through chaos, not through insult, not even through bombs. But this time, one voice, small and trembling, shattered that unbroken history. Please help me." Those words cut through the brass band, through the layers of ceremony and centuries of silence. Theo Rena's body reacted before his mind could stop him. His boot lifted, just an inch at first, and then came down again, forward. A sound like a gunshot echoed through the courtyard. Every head turned. Tourists gasped. Phones whipped up, and the band faltered mid-note. The line of guards remained frozen, except one. Lance Corporal Rena was moving, and with every step, 300 years of royal tradition fell behind him. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply walked, steady, deliberate, unwavering. Not as a soldier rebelling, but as a man doing what was right. Queen Camilla turned sharply, her mask of gray slipping for the first time. Her lips parted, her voice a razor disguised as silk. "Return to your post immediately." He didn't. Charlotte had already stepped back, trembling near the ceremonial chain that divided the royal section from the public. A child caught between two worlds, one of blood and one of duty. Rena reached the barrier, then crossed it. Gasps rippled through the crowd as cameras captured a sight no one had ever seen. A royal guard stepping into the royal enclosure without permission. He stopped beside Charlotte. For a heartbeat, the courtyard fell utterly silent. No music, no motion, just the soft sound of a child's breath. Camilla's smile vanished. "You're making a fool of yourself," she hissed. Rena's reply was calm, steady, the kind that carried farther than a shout. She asked for help, and I heard her. It was the most human sentence ever spoken in that courtyard. Security officers hesitated. No one moved, because what everyone could see was undeniable. This was not a breach of protocol. This was protection. Charlotte edged closer to him, not clinging, not hiding, just standing near the only person who had listened. And for the first time all morning, her shoulders relaxed. Queen Camilla's expression hardened. "You'll lose your job for this." Rena's eyes didn't waver. "If that's the price for doing my duty, I'll pay it." Behind him, the band faltered back into rhythm. Cameras flashed, but every eye in that courtyard was fixed on one image, a little girl finally safe beside the soldier who broke the rules to keep her that way. 30 seconds of silence followed, the longest, most powerful pause Buckingham Palace had ever seen. Then, quietly, the plainclothed officers stepped in, not toward Rena, but toward the Queen. What followed wasn't shouted or dramatized. There were no arrests, no outrage, just quiet movement, the kind that means the truth has been seen. Weeks later, the headlines told the story the world already knew, the royal guard who broke rank to protect a child. Investigations followed, protocols changed, and behind the palace walls, old rules were rewritten in silence. Rena never spoke publicly. He received a commendation, then a quiet reassignment. Princess Charlotte's permanent protection detail. At her next event, she stood taller, smiled freely, and when she spotted him across the courtyard, she touched her chest, a silent thank you from the heart. Because sometimes bravery isn't loud. Sometimes it's just one step forward when everyone else stays still. Oyutao next video teaser almost equals 200 words. What would you have done in Theo Rena's place? Would you have followed orders or followed your heart? This story reminds us that real courage doesn't always wear medals. Sometimes it wears a red tunic and listens when a child whispers for help. If this moment touched you, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in quiet acts of bravery. Your support helps us bring more true, emotional stories to life. Stories that prove compassion can still change the world, even in the most powerful places. And if you thought this story was incredible, wait until you hear what happened next, when another guard faced an even harder choice that would shake the royal family again. Click the next video on your screen, and join us tomorrow for another true royal story that will remind you, sometimes the bravest act is simply doing what's right.